have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Mr. Hammer, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Hey, welcome back to this very exclusive edition of Dr. J Radio Live. We are back with former astronaut, NASA astronaut Story Musgrave, who is a living legend. He's done a lot with his career. Is one of the nicest people I've had a chance to meet and work with. As a matter of fact, if many of you people out there listening recall, we did a panel at Contact in the Desert in Joshua Tree in May 2015. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on this very, very special guest, Dr. Story Musgrave. Dr. Musgrave, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Great.
It's always an honor to speak to you. It's always an honor.
Yeah.
Well, one thing like I said off air, one thing we didn't do last time, is to actually talk a little bit about your NASA career. So rather than me just reading a biography of something that I've read, I wanted to hear from your own words of what got you. I know you were interested in astronomy and whether life was out there since you were for 80 plus years, literally since you were 3 years old, if I'm not mistaken. But what actually led you to go to NASA? You know, what was there a turn in high school or a point in college?
I don't have any high school, so it wasn't high school. I'm very glad that with all the scientific requirements they have, they never asked if I had a high school diploma.
Well, it doesn't matter to me at that point because you had all these
them.
degrees. Yeah.
But I think it was a story you want to. So it's get the job done. It's so I was a get the job done kind of person. I think that's what led. I was a very experienced pilot at that point. I was a parachutist at that point. I was an airplane
right. 800 jump
mechanic and all that stuff. So I had a aeronautical history. But it's I think it's to get the job done. That's who I am. I'm a pragmatist. You know, in the tradition of C.S. Pierce, William James, John Dewey, those American philosophers. It's a form of truth. It's a form of getting to know the world. So I have been a pragmatist since very early childhood, just getting the job done, child labor and farm equipment and then heavy equipment mechanic, and it goes from there. Then, of course, Marine Corps mechanic. So I'm a get the job done kind of person. I like to get on a playing field, new playing fields all the time. What are the rules of this game? And what do I have to know to get to the finish line? And a constant theme in my life has been how you deal with all the details you got to get there. You identify all the details that you got to control and bound within a certain range to bring the system to a certain state. Bringing a system to a state means I've gotten the job done. And so systems engineers, they don't even know. They say it's difficult to define who we are. I know who they are because I've been one of them since before I started college. And that is how you identify and manage details. So you can get where you got to get. And so I think the real asset I brought to NASA, and I think one of the appeals was, okay, I got a new playing field. This is a big playing field. And they do a lot, and there's going to be great challenges, you know. There's going to be great mountains to climb. And so that will challenge my methodology about how you get there.
Let me ask you this. I obviously, we had that deep interest, and I'm glad you mentioned, because obviously it's been shown throughout your life that you are a very pragmatic person and approaches everything with like you said, the mindset, the job skill set, and clearly you like to undertake things.
Yeah.
As we talked last time, you're a skydiver. You know,
That's,
I'm not.
that's a challenge.
There's,
But skydiving,
it is.
people say, well,
It's right.
that's just a hobby. It's just a sport. And it's a stupid thing to do. But not
It
for
is.
me. But not for
It,
me.
but you took it
Me,
seriously, like
I
I
took
did.
it dead serious. And man, I'm going to be
You,
right the first time and right every time. And so it's a new playing field in which to get it very seriously correct, to look at industry standards, best practices, how good can I be, how safe can I be. And so it's another one of a myriad of fields that propels me down the road to get it right the first time and every time. So it's another skill set that I acquired. I got to get it. What are the details? What is the technology? I got to know, and how do I get there? And so
what's
people can say, and it's not a very serious thing. It was a serious thing in my life, and it propelled me down the road to being a great trauma surgeon or a great astronaut.
I concur with that statement because, as you know, I jumped to it. You have, for the record, everybody out there listening, he has over 6 times as many jumps as I do, and I have 128. So that makes it over 800, and I take it very seriously because our lives are at the line. And like you said, it gives you the ability to, or the mindset that you want to do something else, and just being a skydiver, being that small percentage of the population, 0.1% if I'm not mistaken, or 0.01%. There's only 30,000 active jumpers in a country of over 300 million. Point I'm trying to get at is that you went to do the last frontier. You actually went to explore space, and I thought that's what was really fantastic. So let's go to your first mission. Which mission was that? Gemini?
Uh, now I joined the program at the end of Gemini. So my first, I was a backup crew on the first Skylab mission. That was our first space station. It's kind of been lost in history. Well, it was a very successful space station built from Apollo Saturn V and 200 experiments. We flew that in 1973. So I was a backup on that one, fully trained to fly Apollo or to go to the Skylab, run the lab, and all the experiments. But the first one I flew was STS-6, Challenger's first flight.
And that's actually what do you the Challenger? So you actually okay, I knew you did a lot of Skylab missions, and I knew you joined the program during the end of the Gemini. I wasn't that one thing I had wrong was whether you had been a Gemini astronaut, but I did know you were a space shuttle astronaut. I did not know you had actually flown in the Challenger. Obviously, that was very, very tragic. As former airsmith myself for paintball guns, when I found out it was an O-ring, it actually made me really sad because all these lives were at the line. It put our program for 2.5 years on the hold.
O-ring was old stuff. There's no new technology about that.
That's right.
All of us
That's
that
right.
flew airplanes, man, you're in the North Country. You brief the mechanics that start your engines to absolutely look underneath the airplane for hydraulic leaks. And you watch and see if they look. If they don't look, you shut the engines down, brief them again. But if you find the leaks, the only cure is to tow that airplane into a heated hangar and warm it all up. That is the technology that we knew. We knew what the problem was. We went and did it anyway.
That's right, and like you said, it's an old technology. This is something that goes back, I think, pre-World War II, if I'm not mistaken.
As soon as we got hydraulic systems.
Yeah. So anyway, it was very, very, very sad. I was very traumatized. I remember because we were all watching it at school, the actual launch. But let's get off the sad subject and go on to your Skylab missions. Obviously, you had performed 200 experiments. I think it was a very fantastic missions as the Skylab missions because that was prior to us, working internationally with the ISS because this was America's project.
And we extended human spaceflight. So on Gemini 7, we had a 2-week-long mission. So that was the longest. The Russians overtook us in terms of longevity and survival, long duration up there. But long, long before Mir, Gemini, we had 2 weeks. And so because we had 2 weeks, the first Skylab was a month. We doubled that. The second Skylab was 2 months. We doubled that. The third Skylab was 3 months. And so we really were showing how to live in space and taking a hard look at what the physiological effects of long-duration spaceflight is.
One of the things a lot of people want to ask, especially children who want to become astronauts, and of course have to really make that a decision early on in their lives, with as long as staying out of trouble and taking the right courses, studying science and of course aeronautics plays a very big role since essentially, if I'm not mistaken, everybody's a pilot, right?
Not anymore. So we started in my day. You had to be not only a pilot, which I'm a very experienced pilot. Started flying out right after the Marine Corps back in 1956. But starting with an astronaut class of 1978, you did not have to be a pilot at all of any kind. And so for the mission specialists, they called them, those were the people that would do the payload and the spacewalks and do the science. In 1978, they no longer had to be pilots.
See, that's one thing I didn't know, because obviously I've interviewed the majority of the astronauts were pre that era, pre 78, and then the ones since then, of course, have been active. There were pilots as well. But this just goes to show your character, your love for space and exploring. I can imagine the feeling, as I know when I get in the sky and I'm looking at the bottom of the earth and knowing there's nothing between me and that, quiet earth, except the quiet air around me, unless someone's with me in free fall. I never had the joys of being behind the controls of a plane. But what does it feel like to actually see the curvature of the earth and to see the other planets and be in the vacuum of space?
Well, of course, the vacuum doesn't mean anything to you because you're pressurized to sea level, unless you take a walk and then your suit stiffens up for the delta pressure across the suit. But the window you can't get enough of, but there's 100 components to what the window is. So the window is geography. The window is sunrise, sunsets, it's auroras. It's the currents in the ocean. You can actually see the currents if you get the right reflected sunlight. It's the mountains. It's the incredible aesthetics of sand dunes, all the different kinds of artistic forms of sand dunes, but it goes on and on. So at the window, which you brought up, there's 100 components to the window. What are you looking for?
Yes, everything from pressure to crosswinds, I can imagine, to so much more when you're dealing with that. And the of course the thickness of the atmosphere is a big role, as just from jumping. If you're jumping at 10,000 feet or 30,000 feet, that's the difference between whether you need oxygen or not to pass from hypoxia.
There is air in space, so you are pushing air. And if you don't get high enough up, you're going to be home in a couple of days. Like
That's
if
right.
you're only at 100 miles up there, you're going to be home in a day. So
Yes.
there is drag. Now, I know the numbers don't mean a darn thing, 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 12. But I'm just saying, I put out a satellite that manufactured electronic chips. On the front side of the satellite, which is pushing against the air, it was 10 to the minus 6 torr vacuum. The back side was 10 to the minus 12. And those are exponential. So
Oh yeah.
you do have some air in space. So it's not a perfect vacuum, yeah.
Yeah. See, there you just actually corrected a misconception for most people right there. Real quick, let me ask you on that comment. What do you have to say to any person who wants to become an astronaut? Any advice you'd like to give them?
Follow your heart.
Yeah, I agree with that with
Don't
everything
you
in
dare
life.
listen to anybody else.
And that's the way your mantra
Don't
should
you
are.
dare listen to anybody else. My little story, my 9-year-old, she's a good example of what you do with people in terms of their education and experiences. I try to give her an opportunity to get education and real-life experiences, but I never, ever guide her on what her path should be. I leave that alone. It's her life, not mine. So I leave that alone. But if I see she has an interest in something and she inquires about that interest, to me, then I support that interest and I try to find opportunities that she can pursue. Her. That's capital H-E-R. Her interest. So, but become an astronaut, I really do think that you can pursue your passions. So what you do next is the intersection of your native talents That's you come into the world with different talents. Different people got different talents. They're good, with different things. So you got native talent, but then you've got the totality from when you come into the world of totality of education and real-world experiences. So that's kind of adding to your skill set, adding to your character. And so you pursue that. You pursue what is interested to you. You look in the mirror today, who am I? What am I going to do tomorrow? But, of course, it is critical what windows will open for you. Sometimes life is not fair. Sometimes you're ready, you're prepared, and that door doesn't open. That's okay. Okay, it's not fair. It should have opened, but it did not, and so I go somewhere else. But life is an intersection of what you're natively good at, what your current, the leverage, how you leverage everything into every past experience and skill set you ever built up, what you're going to do tomorrow. But the passion, that is the energy that leads you to climb the next mountain. And what mountain? And that's number one, to follow your heart. So when I say you want to be an astronaut, I just say follow your heart. And you will be building up a skill set along the way and finding when you say, that's actually what I want to do in life. I really want to do space. So now you have to develop for the passion for the space. And at this point, you can fill in any gaps that you have that's required to get there.
Well, now I'm glad you brought that up for several reasons. First of all, that's advice everyone should take for their lives.
Yeah.
You actually brought up your daughter. That is the best advice I think any parent out there should keep in mind for their child. Pursue their passions and don't push them one way or another because you don't want to create them to get upset. But you said something
their
very
life. It's not
Yes.
yours.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
like when one culture meets another, it's like back to the terraforming thing. Doggone it, this biology owns. This is their home, leave it alone.
And that's
and
exactly
it's her
what
life, not mine.
And that's exactly the topic we're going to pursue. And let me just throw in this one thing. When you mentioned being prepared and life being unfair and the door has to present itself, just like on the other end of the spectrum, luck favors luck favors preparedness, or chance favored preparedness.
So it certainly does. But you also know this what we call timing, timing, destiny, and luck. I have done exceedingly well in terms of destiny looking after me. When I wanted to go somewhere, the doors open. And sometimes they don't open. Sometimes you darn well deserve it. You've worked for it, and you're there, and you're ready, but the door won't open. Well, you have to be ready for the door that doesn't open. Life is not fair, and so the door doesn't open, you take the next one. But
that's right.
Another thing that's related to that is play to your strengths. Is play to your strengths, and when you're trying to get somewhere and you run into resistance, hey, I don't mess with resistance. You can say, well, man, I'm tough and I'm stubborn and I'm going to plow through this resistance. I am not going to let somebody stop me or some closed door. I'm not going to be stopped. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to charge that line and break through. That's the wrong approach. You can butt your head against that wall forever.
Yes.
When I run into significant resistance, I walk away. Story Musgrave walks away because I'm looking at 100 alternative opportunities sitting right in my face. Why should I bang my head against a closed door when there's 20 open ones right nearby? You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You don't want to
go to
get
plan
stubborn.
B or plan Z even.
It's plan A through Z. There's another door that's open. And the other thing I just talked about is play to your strengths. You don't have a single weakness. You never think about your weaknesses. You just push them away. You play to what you're good at. You play to the skills that you've developed. You play to your native talents. You don't say, I'm not so good at this, I got to strengthen that. No. You play to your strengths and you take the path of least resistance, and that is the way you go the furthest. It sounds cowardly, but that's Story Musgrave.
And that's the way
I got where I got.
I was just going to say, exactly. And look how brilliant and a fascinating career you've had and a life that you still have and adore. That's why I have to say it's great. Now, you said something really important earlier, which leads us to the final topic of this evening. Killing natives, our history in general, going back even to the history of North America. What's the first thing we do when we get here? Kill the locals so we can take over. Like you
Yeah, it
said,
hurts
gosh
me
darn
so
it.
bad.
Yeah.
It hurts me. It
It,
pains me when I look at that history and what incredible champions they were, and it just hurts me when one culture meets another, and that's what happens. I just look at who they were, and I just wish I could turn that history back. It personally hurts me.
well, we can't, sadly, and it bothers me too. It bothers to know that our human nature can stoop to that level and do that. But we have to worry about the future, I'm worried because we're about to go to Mars and possibly other planets and set up colonies there. Well, what if things work out and
And
they decide
you
to bring
also
more?
know I keep interrupting because I'm enthusiastic.
It's good.
We
It's
have the same
good.
problem today when one culture meets another.
Yeah,
We are
that's right.
continuing to try to give our way of life to other people. Hey, no, leave them alone. We continue
Especially
to try to push our culture and our
yes.
politics and the way we do things. We keep holding it up as the globe standard, and it is not. It's our
I'm glad you
standard.
mentioned that because we play the world police. Like you said, we go
Yeah, we
into
do.
a third world country that's been fine for thousands of years, and we step in and say, "No, try this method
Yeah,
out," and
but
we'll
we
kill any.
destabilize it in the process. It
Yep.
comes apart, and then we leave it. We
Yeah.
leave it.
It's sad.
It's come apart, and we leave it that way. But the thing is,
And
when are we going to wise up?
that's why I'm worried. Are we going to take the same issues to space? Because what happens if we go there and we find microbes on Mars, but we say, "Well, they're not significant enough, but
Yeah,
we're more
yeah,
important."
we'll
So
do.
we go ahead,
That's right. We'll do
terraform.
the same thing.
So let's talk about the
It's,
ethics real quick of
it's
terraforming because let's just assume we don't go to a planet that may have, say, apes or an intelligent civilization that we may not necessarily be able to kill off the entire planet. But we would be able to, if we terraform over long enough, to say, kill off maybe bacteria or any microbe or anything on that level. That would be wrong because that is their home.
it is. So you would have to explore. I think that you'd have to put that on the table and take that very seriously. So it would be an issue.
Well, what do you recommend for both humanity and general for us to wise up to not do this in the future, and for anybody who may be listening to this that is working at NASA that is possibly planning some sort of terraforming mission on some planet?
Well, I was at I won't use any names, but I was at a very, very big meeting. And I mean a major meeting. And my topic was a lander was just about to land on Mars, actually, and that was a couple hours before the landing. And so people asked me to do one on sort of the history and the highlights of space flight and all that. So I got done with that. And then I brought up the idea of the terraforming and to really make sure there's no life there, and if there is, the ethics of that, especially what is the level of life, whether it's a virus or bacteria on up to some form of consciousness and intelligence. But so I had this person stand up and scream at me that it's not an ethical issue.
What? Really?
Yes, and this is a very prominent person.
And this is recently.
Oh
We're
yeah,
talking about like
it's
the last few
very recent.
years.
And they
Wow.
told me that it's not an ethical issue. And so I can't believe that we're going through this, so we got into. So I kept going down the road of when one culture meets another, when this happens, that's not an ethical issue. And I spoke to this guy, and we're in public with 600 people. And I said, hey, the bottom line is it's just like when the Europeans came over to this country and what happened then. And this person in 2015 said, that's okay. Look at how it turned out.
Oh gosh. So he
What?
didn't even have one sense of wisdom to realize
So
what we
I
did was wrong.
sat down. I can't go anywhere with that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's where you make
So
a
if you
point
look
of
at the way it
resist.
turned out, in other words, what he's saying is we went from savages to civilization, and so it's okay, So, it's the ends.
Well,
The ends
knock
justify the means.
knock on wood. I hate to say this, Dr. Musgrave, but if we have that attitude and we go out there and we actually meet civilized life with intelligence and maybe some
But
technology,
we need to
they're
love
not
it.
going to take very
We need
kindly
to
to that.
love it. We need to be excited to it, but you got to go and surrender.
Yes.
See, we're always
yes.
after conquering. So you've heard about conquering space. You're not going to conquer space.
No.
The attitude is I'm going to surrender to that. I am the guest. And the only way I'll get to understand you and appreciate you, is to dissolve myself into your environment.
And I honestly, I think a lot of this has to do with your background of just and your heart of who you are and have always been, and some of it probably from wisdom from your years of life. I have a worry that us as humans maybe don't live long enough to even reach the point of having wisdom to the point of being able to use that wisdom long enough before we pass. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I don't know about living. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But you got to be immersed. If you're immersed in creatures, a little story there. She loves worms. She plays with worms. She goes in the pond, and that's brown water. And so she got all these things nibbling on her, and she plays with the slime. She plays with the algae, and she's into that kind of stuff. And in my home, you don't kill roaches. Story? Do we kill roaches in this house? You got that? What do we do
Yes.
with roaches in this house, Story? We pick them up and take them outside. You heard it from the little girl.
That's right.
And so
That's
I'm
right.
telling you, the sensitivity, it's, that's what you do.
Yes.
And so
And it has
this little
to trend.
9-year-old, she's already into that game. And she
She's
can
got
pick
more
up
sense.
butterflies, huh?
She's got more sense than this person you just spoke to.
And so, but anyway, so when it's her time to look after these things, she'll be ready. When it's her time to look after Mother Earth, she will do it from the heart. Not because it's a political agenda. She will look after the Earth.
That's exactly what I was saying. She has more sense already as a 9-year-old than that person you spoke to that didn't believe it was an ethical issue. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm a firm believer in that too. You have to respect life in all forms, and especially when it's their home, because everything is an integral part of an ecosystem. So to take any part of it away, I think it's very sad. Dr. Musgrave, it's always a pleasure. I don't want to keep you any longer. Let me ask you if you have any final words for anyone.
No, it's not final. We'll be back at it later.
We have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Nathan Hamane, and you're listening to
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.